So what's the deal with medication schedules? Why can't we just take one tablet or capsule and be done forever? Or how come you have to take, sometimes it's once a day, or sometimes it's twice a day, 3 times a day, once a day, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday? What is the deal with medication schedules and why are they so important? Hello there everybody, welcome back to another episode of Pharmacy for the People, where I try to put your health back into your hands by equipping you with the tools that you need to overcome the oppressive tyranny of medical complexity and cultural disillusionment. My name is James, I'm a licensed practicing pharmacist, and if you enjoyed today's episode, consider subscribing to the channel and then sending this video to someone who you also would think might find this helpful. Okay, so the idea of taking medications on schedules is not based on a terribly complex idea. You have to keep enough active substance in the body to maintain a particular effect. That's it, right? That's the answer in a nutshell, but what exactly am I talking about here? If you've grown up in a human body, as I'm sure that most of you probably have, you realized fairly early on you couldn't just have one meal or one drink and be done for the rest of your life. No, we have to keep adding to it. Our bodies are complex machines constantly building up and tearing down and getting rid of waste the whole time while we live our happy little lives. And food and water are our fuel. It's going into the machine and it pumps out an effect. Well, using the exact same mechanics, medications get used in our bodies and then chewed up in the machines and end up sailing the waste seas into toilets or elsewhere. So maintaining a certain amount of active substance medication in your body is easier said than done. So let's put a quick pin in that and we'll come back in a minute. The other half of the medication schedule issue is exerting of an effect in the body. And you may recall in previous episodes we talked about how medications work and how they do what they do in our bodies, highlighting the ideas of pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics, the absorption, distribution, mechanisms of action, metabolism and elimination, all of medications. Today's discussion is going to focus in particularly on metabolism and elimination, but it's going to build on everything else. Specifically in a recent video about what medications do, we talked about what a mechanism of action is, the thing that the molecules do in our bodies when you take a medication. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's because you don't watch enough of my videos. Or because I'm a bad teacher. Anyway, go back and watch that if you don't know what I'm talking about. But given that molecules like medications actually do something in your body, it's possible that you won't actually see the effect of that unless there's enough of that mechanism of action going around to actually change the physiological flow of your body. You know what I mean? Like you can't throw a Dixie cup of red glitter into the Nile and expect the whole thing to turn red. Like that just doesn't work. You have to have enough of it in there to make a difference. So imagine that your body's physiology is like a river of biochemical effects headed downstream in a helpful, constructive way. Breathing, laughing, talking, heart beating, using food as a fuel, a biochemical river. You follow me? Now imagine that something along that riverbed, causes the river to break its banks and then to flood the local town, go outside of its normal physiological flow and do something destructive. Well, that something is disease. Disease is something that changes the flow of that biochemical river to the point that you see a deleterious effect, a bad effect, like psoriasis, diabetes, migraines, rheumatoid arthritis, or it could be like a medical event, like a stroke or a heart attack, a broken bone, something like that. Either way, a disease is the river, our biochemical river, breaking its bank and doing something bad. Well, now imagine that there is a civilization of happy little beavers that are building happy little dams to keep the river in its banks, and the tiny molecules of medication in our bodies are like the tiny sticks that these beavers are using to build their dams, to change the biochemical flow of our bodies. With enough sticks in the right place, the river will stay in its banks and not go and flood our city, and our city stays safe from the dark chaos waters or whatever. But every few minutes, the biochemical river is washing away a couple of these sticks, the dam weakens over time, and then suddenly it's not enough to keep the river in its banks, and our town gets soggy again. So sure, the beavers have to maintain the dam, but why is the dam losing sticks? That is metabolism and elimination. In previous episodes, we talked about how medications have to get absorbed into our bodies and distributed through our bloodstream all over the body to have a full systemic effect, as opposed to a local effect. Think like aches and pains all over your body as opposed to antibiotic ointment on a cut that you got on your foot doing yard work in your very convenient flip-flops. So medications ride the bloody streams of our vasculature, get deposited into tissue beds, absorbed into and around cells. Then they perform their mechanisms of action, and then either they get used up on the spot right there where they did their action, or, and much more likely, they just diffuse back from the tissue into the bloodstream and take another go round on the bloody circuit. And the reason the second spin through circulation is so important is because of our liver. Our liver is one of the hardest working organs in our body. The liver produces bile that helps to break down and absorb food. It makes proteins for our blood. It stores massive amounts of energy in branching carbohydrate chains. It helps to make hemoglobin for our red blood cells. But what's most important it does a whole lot of things. I'm not even scratching the surface. But what is most important for our discussion today is that the liver also filters all kinds of molecules out of our bloodstream and changes them, metabolizes them. The liver filters things out of our blood. So again, medications, after they perform their mechanisms of action where we need them, they move back into the bloodstream, back into circulation, the liver changes them or metabolizes them, and then they get eliminated either in the kidneys through the urine or in your stool, the poopy. Naturally, there are other methods for metabolism and elimination in our body, but the liver is the major source. What does the liver's work mean for our original question? Well, when we take a medication and it gets where we need it, the medication doesn't just stay there. It moves around in our body and it gets lost on its journey. Just like the beaver dam metaphor, when those sticks break away from the dam and they go down the river, they're gone. They're not coming back. The beaver has to find new sticks. And we have to take another dose of medication. So that's the general answer to the question of why do we have to take medications on schedules? Well, we have to keep enough of it in our body to maintain a particular effect. But the specifics of this get very gritty very quickly. Each medication requires different concentrations in our bloodstream to maintain its effect. Some require really high concentrations, some don't. Each medication is distributed into different parts of our body depending on the chemical nature of the medication and the chemical nature of the body part, the tissue. Each medication is removed from circulation and metabolized at its own rate by the various enzymes in the liver, and those enzymes can only handle a certain amount at a time. Each medication is eliminated at different rates by the kidneys and the intestines. Each medication also hits an upper limit of beneficial effects and falls over into toxicity and adverse effects if the dose is too high. Remember, the dose makes the poison. You remember that? So answering the question, why do we have to take a medication on a particular schedule, suddenly balloons into all these factors that ultimately coalesce into a particular dose of medication on a particular schedule. And when a medication is approved by the FDA, the company that creates it has to have researched and documented all of these different factors and provided that information for the FDA to review. I'm not defending everything that manufacturers and the FDA does, but I'm trying to offer a little perspective for how much intensity goes into this research long before it makes it to the market. If you don't know how a medication gets approved by the FDA and then onto the market, well, it's complex, and we will get there in a later episode. Yes, this is a lot of detail, and those details are very gritty, confusing, overlapping, and infinitely sensitive. But our willing and competent guide through all of this grit is called the HalfLife. Are you familiar with the HalfLife? It's going to help us apply all of this detail in a meaningful way. A medication's half-life. A half-life is the amount of time it takes to eliminate half of an active substance from your body. Or in our metaphor, how long it takes to wash away half of the necessary sticks in our dam. So say you take a medication and 10 milligrams of it get into your circulation. The amount of time it takes for there to only be 5 milligrams left is one half-life. So say it took 4 hours to go from 10 milligrams in your circulation to 5 milligrams in your circulation, you would say that that medication has a 4-hour half-life. And remember, in order to elicit its effect, a medication has to keep a certain amount active in your body at all times. So when half of it goes away, we have to replenish that amount. So what that means is, roughly speaking, you need to take another dose of a medication every half-life of that medication. That is a really, really rough generalization because there is a lot of wiggle room in that. But basically what that means is that if the half-life of a medication is 24 hours, we have to take it on a everyday basis, once a day. If the half-life of a medication is 12 hours, it's a twice-a-day medication. You get where I'm going with this, but there is a lot of play in that. The reality is that half-lives range all over the place, from seconds to weeks, but we experiment before FDA approval. We experiment to find out exactly what the regimen, what the schedule needs to be to keep just enough in your body to maintain that effect, but not so much that it goes over the top into toxicity and creating issues. That's how a half-life relates to adverse effects, side effects, and toxicity. But I will save that whole piece for a different topic. Toxicity is one of my favorite topics, but we'll get there. For example, let's consider a common medication like ibuprofen. The bottle, the packaging says that you should take one tablet, 200 milligrams, every 4 to 6 hours. Well, we've all been there, and we know that the pain relief effect doesn't last that long, and we either defy the directions and end up taking more tablets before it says we're allowed to, or as we're waiting for the next dosing interval, the pain creeps back in and we're very sad people. And that's because the half-life for ibuprofen in most adults using the oral form is only 2 hours. So in 4 to 6 hours, we're going through 2 to 3 half-lives, and the concentration has been cut in half 2 to 3 times. So perhaps it's not surprising that the pain is starting to sneak back in. But for self-dosing over the counter, that's the safe regimen, and that's why it's written that way. I'm not suggesting that you should overdo it. I'm just explaining why it is the way that it is. You may have also noticed on the box label that it says that you should consult a physician or a pharmacist if you are taking other medications, if you want to exceed the amount of dose that's recommended on the box, if you're dosing for a child who's 12 years and younger, etc., etc. The reason for that is, and most of what a clinical pharmacist does, is because there are many, many factors that affect half-lives of medications, and there are a ton of situations, scenarios, where these half-lives can be changed, making a normal dose of a medication either go much higher into toxicity land or not high enough so that you're not actually getting the effect that you need. Keep in mind, some of these things are much more life-threatening than, aches and pains that you use Tylenol or ibuprofen to treat. So what affects the half-lives of medications? Well, of course, there are far too many of them for me to list them all, but before we end today, let me tickle your imagination with a few of these. Our livers and kidneys mature over many years after we're born. They cannot metabolize and eliminate at the same rate as adult livers and kidneys. If something hurts our liver or our kidneys and both of them or one of them fails even temporarily, it can dramatically change how we metabolize and eliminate medications. Again, toxicity or lack of effect, underdose. As we age, our kidney function will drop and our ability to eliminate medications will slow down. That's a natural part of our aging process. It's inevitable. If we're born with certain poorly functioning enzymes because of a genetic variation, the enzymes in our liver may metabolize at a different rate, creating a different scenario. If our bodies are very large or very small, in obesity or cachexia, the same concentration of a medication might either be toxic or entirely ineffective. How do you think a liver or kidney transplant would affect the half-lives of medications? What if you're taking a medication that slows down or speeds up the metabolism of a different medication? I think you're getting the picture. Doses have to be adapted, and sometimes in certain scenarios, medications are just not appropriate, contraindicated, like entirely. Not to toot our own horn, but that is the value of having a good pharmacist in your medical team. All these factors can accumulate into a real pharmacokinetic mess. And we can help tease through that and decide what factors matter and how we need to modify the medication regimen to keep it safe and effective. You remember safe and effective? That's a callback to an old video, but that's basically how I defined what a pharmacist does. keeping things safe and effective with medications. Okay, let's wrap this up. We take medications on schedules based on all the mind-numbing details of that particular medication in order to keep enough of it in our bodies. Missing a dose might mean that the concentration drops down too low to be effective, and overdosing on a medication might push it over the edge and cause real harm and toxicity. Okay, thank you so much for your time and attention. I know that was a lot of information, but I really hope it made sense. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know by liking and subscribing. Leave comments down below. If you have a specific question about medication schedule, please ask. This is the tip of the iceberg, and I hope this was a nice general overview of what we're doing with medication schedules. Thanks for watching, and hopefully now you're a little bit more equipped to handle medication questions for yourself and your family. May all of your biochemical rivers flow with order and grace. Power to the people. Fly landed on my face in the middle of it. Hopefully that was a good cut. I'll use it if it works.